And I'm here to tell you that when we treat our bodies a little more gently, all of a sudden women are losing weight. All of a sudden they're sleeping better.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they have more energy. All of a sudden they have their libido return. And it's all because they are treating themselves with kindness.
I have to talk to you about the viral TED Talk you brought up. I mean, how many views at this point?
Over 15 million.
Wild. What was the talk on?
Intermittent fasting in women.
12-12 is basically what, for people that don't know?
It's 12 hours out of your day in which you have 2-3 meals. It is 12 hours out of the day that you are not eating. It is super simple.
Fasting, a flexible, conscious fasting look like for many women out there?
I think it is being...
Cynthia, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, we've talked many years, remotely mainly, right?
Yes.
This is I can't believe, I'm in disbelief that this is our first time meeting in real life. Because if you would have told me, this is sort of the weird telehealth brain that I have, because I meet so many people online all day long for 15 years that in my mind I've met most of them in person, but I haven't.
Yeah.
So great to see you in person.
Yeah, so nice to be here.
Yeah. So tell everybody, for those that don't know your background, let's start there.
Yeah, so I'm a traditionally trained nurse practitioner. I worked in ER medicine and cardiology for 20 years, and 9 years ago got frankly fed up writing prescriptions. I felt like so much of what I was seeing and talking about with my patients were things that were lifestyle mediated. And so I took a major pivot. My husband thought I was having a midlife crisis. And so I took this venture into becoming an entrepreneur, and almost immediately started attracting women same age as me, struggling with the same issues, feeling like their voices were kind of muffled by the traditional medical establishment. And so started off with just a very small private practice, created group programs, pivoted to, as an introvert, wanting to do something that was scary, which was doing a TED Talk, which led to 2 TED Talks, which led to one that went completely viral, and led to some amazing opportunities. So now I have a podcast and do a lot of public speaking, and have written a couple books, and very humbly sit back and say that what I said to my husband 9 years ago was that I could make a larger impact by not being part of a large cardiology practice in Washington, D.C. And, my husband now sits back and says, oh, okay, you weren't having a midlife crisis. You actually, were able to foretell what was going to kind of evolve. And so I kind of always say, I humbly sit back and say that the universe kind of gently pushed me in that direction. And here I am today.
That's beautiful. Were you always good at following your intuition?
I'm better now, but if you were to look back at the trajectory of my lifetime, I did not always do what everyone else did. I'll give you an example. So in undergrad, I was pre-law. I was a poli-sci major, applied to law school, started to get this itch that wasn't the right. I would enjoy studying law. I would not have enjoyed being an attorney. I don't like to argue, so why would I want to be an attorney? And so I got a dog, and the dog got me interested in medicine. And then all of a sudden I started taking pre-med classes. And so, I always talk about this path less traveled. I went on to do a second undergraduate degree and went on to do a graduate degree. And so throughout my lifetime, I've sometimes made decisions that my peers have not, maybe things that aren't safe. And so, yes, I do a good job following my intuition. I trust it a whole lot more now, and I understand as a manifesting generator, if you are familiar with human design theory, that is a big part of how I make decisions, is that I trust my intuition. And now that I do that, things seem to come along a little more readily than they did before.
Yeah, so everybody's different, right, in human design. I don't know much about it, but I've had a few guests and telehealth patients also that want to type me. They've told me that I'm a manifesting generator too, which, I don't know much about it again, but it's what is it for people that don't know? People are like, what's human design?
Yeah, so it's really looking at the way that you view the world, the way you interact with the world. And for me, a great deal of my decision making comes down to things that I get interested and passionate about. And then that will then follow along for me. That then becomes business decisions, that becomes personal decisions. I'm not familiar with all the other types of human design, but I know for myself, it's so consistent with behavioral mechanisms that have guided me throughout my lifetime. A lot of it has to do with that intuitive, what is your gut literally telling you? I am very left-brained. However, I have learned to be a little bit more right-brained, because that has guided me in directions that have been very good directions.
Yeah.
Case in point, doing that TED Talk, I wanted to challenge myself, not realizing that would open up into 1,000 other opportunities.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what I've heard from the human design experts is that if you're not a manifesting generator, it doesn't mean you have to be something you're not. And being okay with, this is my strengths, and not trying to compare yourself to other people or be like other people, because that may not be your calling. It may not be your talent, and the way that you show up to the world and the way that the world shows up to you, for you.
Well, and it's interesting, on my team, we've all taken the human design test.
Okay, so I need to do that. I need to properly do that with my team and everything.
And what's interesting is everyone has different strengths, but those of us that are, manifesting generators, I understand the way the brain works. I understand how to motivate them. And so, it's one of many things that we can look at to better understand ourselves. And I think that's so much of what middle age, one of the gifts of middle age is really better understanding, what are my true strengths? What are the gifts that I've been given to be able to serve others? Yeah.
So, what do you say to somebody though? Because you're talking about a big leap when you made that leap. Paradigm shift between conventional medicine and established cardiology practice, and then going, I'm going to go on my own. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And that's, even if you're not a manifesting generator, no matter who you are, that's a leap of faith.
It's tremendous.
And that's an intuition. So any tips for people to be better at trusting that gut feeling?
Yeah, I think, let me be clear. Leaps of faith that I have taken in my life have been done in a methodical way. Obviously, a conversation with my husband, all of a sudden you go from having 2 incomes to 1. That's a big trust on his part that, yes, my wife is going to be successful. But I think when we're thinking about pivots throughout our lifetime, number 1, is it something you've given thought to? Mm-hmm. Number 2, is it something where you can identify a plan to get from plan A to plan B? One thing that I'm a big believer in are stretch goals, not realizing that's what I was setting up for myself. We can't necessarily see how to get from A to B, but it's forcing ourselves to get outside of our comfort zones. Mm-hmm. And so if someone's listening and they're like, I'm really curious how that works, it's deciding between, I'm going to sell 10 books. No, I'm going to sell 100,000 books. I'm going to learn how to a 5K. No, actually, I'm going to do an ultra marathon. It's thinking of things in terms of scale. But I think for each one of us, we all have, human nature is to be conservative. Human nature is to be comfortable. Human nature is a way of, keeping us safe. And so, doing things that make us a little less comfortable day to day is a way to kind of set yourself up for that. It doesn't have to be as grandiose as what I did, when in all actuality, I think my entire family, all my friends probably thought I had lost my mind when I left traditional allopathic medicine. But retrospectively, it makes sense.
Yeah.
At the time, everyone was probably thinking I had a total midlife crisis.
Yeah, right. So was there the distance between cause and effect? At any point, did you doubt yourself, even though you trusted your initial intuition?
Of course.
Moments of doubt.
Because I had no business acumen. I had no business skills. I didn't know how to market anything. I knew how to educate. I knew how to inspire people. I knew how to be, someone that could help people. And I said, that's huge, because that isn't per se something that you can train yourself to do. I think that is what I meant to do. I think the other things that I needed to learn, it was I need to get a business coach. Mm-hmm. I need to understand X, Y, and Z. So I started investing in myself, investing in, and I believe in having coaches. We all need coaches. I think the best of us have coaches throughout our lifetime, irrespective of what career path you're on. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, the differentiator was I acknowledged what I didn't know, and I worked very hard to fill in those gaps as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And I think within 2 years, my husband was like, okay, this is real. Mm-hmm. This is not just, you're having a crisis. This is something that you're actually putting into place. And so things have kind of fallen into place since then.
Yeah.
But I think that's the big thing, is acknowledging what you don't know and be willing to either hire or coach or educate yourself. I believe in being a lifelong learner, and that will never change. I'm always taking courses. I'm always doing trainings. I'm always endeavoring to invest in my education, because I think it's vital.
Yeah. I didn't plan on talking with you about this, but it's so good. This is good life wellness that a lot of people live in fear, right? And they shrink themselves. And what I also hear that you did is that, yes, it was a leap of faith. Yes, you trusted your gut instinct, but it wasn't rash. It wasn't erratic. It wasn't like flippant. It was thought through. It was methodical. It was you had wisdom. You had a plan, and then you had the faith to execute that plan. Which I think that's both and is really important, because people could be, saying it's their intuition and just living erratic lives.
Yes,
that is not aligned with a greater goal. Right? It's just the whims of the world. It's the ups and downs. But there was a plan that I think is beautiful that you executed, that a lot of people are going to get a lot out of.
I mean, the other thing that I would say is that I've always been calm under pressure. I've always been someone, and part of it's the byproduct of my childhood and what I went through as a child. And it's why I was so good as an ER nurse. It was why I was so good as a cardiology NP. I have an ability to focus, whether that means I jokingly have said this, but my functional medicine doctor would probably agree. I probably have some degree of spectrum-ish behavior that I can focus in on things that, unlike a lot of other people, and I think because I can do that, it allows me to get very clear and intentional about what I'm doing.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of us within the wellness space, I hear this a lot from friends, colleagues, guests, in the space, that we're somewhere on that neurodivergent
yes. Oh, I absolutely
spectrum,
am.
for sure.
I absolutely am.
It makes you wonder how many, most people probably are in some degree, right? There's so much diversity, and they don't recognize that they're okay. It's okay to be different.
Well, and it's interesting. I have a cousin who's a physician, and she's like the big sister I never had. And we take a trip together every year. And she looked at me most recently in April and said, I think we both are neurodivergent. And she was like, here's why. So she's like, gave me this list of behavioral things that are unique to both of us. And she said, think about your ability. She's like, you tell me you podcast prep, or it's something you're working on, and you will spend hours and days, and you can focus, like you can tune everything else out. Obviously not my family, but like you can focus that intensely. And she said, I think that's part of your it's your superpower. And so I agree with you that I think there are many of us that are neurodivergent to some degree or another. We just haven't, we label ourselves, but we haven't been formally diagnosed. And so I think that's probably what makes us unique.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to Dr. Jolene Brighton about the same thing. Yeah. So it is, and everybody's unique. So, all right. I have to talk to you about the viral TED Talk you brought up. I mean, how many views at this point?
Over 15 million.
Wild. What was the talk on?
Intermittent fasting in women. But what's most interesting is that, so to kind of back up, so in 2018, I decided I was going to challenge myself. I was going to do a talk. So I was offered a talk. I did my first TEDx talk in December of 2018. Around that time, I was offered a second in the state where I was born, South Carolina. And they said, Cynthia, we've been asked 1,000 times, we need to have a female-centric talk. What do you want to talk about? And so I looked at my husband. I said, what do I know a lot about? He said, intermittent fasting. It was that easy. That was the decision. So I, prep for the talk, go to do the talk 3 weeks before I get really sick. And this is relevant from the perspective of part of my 13-day hospitalization for a ruptured appendix. Part of it was I want to get home to my family, and the other was I felt such a tremendous calling to still do this TED Talk. And the organizers, I think, thought I, again, lost my mind. They're like, you just spent all this time in the hospital. You were really sick. You lost 15 pounds. Do you have enough strength to come? I was like, absolutely, as long as my surgeon gives me the okay, which she did. And the irony is I felt so called, like one of the few times in my adult life that I felt a tremendous, whether it was spiritual or universal push to do this talk, not realizing that was truly instrumental in the trajectory of the last 6 years. Wow. And so it's, showing up when otherwise no one would have questioned me not doing that talk, but just to purely show my kids I was okay.
That's beautiful. And as a fellow introvert, and doing something you've never done before, getting on a stage in front of people, right? What was prep like?
So first time, terrifying. Second time, because I only had 3 weeks to prep, I had to, get my talk together, complete it, give it to memory. I was less concerned about doing the talk the second time around because I knew I could. I think the greater concern was, am I physically going to be able to get up there and do this? Because I had been, I lost 50. I was just so weak and didn't have a ton of energy, but I just intellectually felt like I needed to do it. I can tell you the morning of, after watching all the other speakers the day before, I had a massive imposter syndrome because the people at that talk were so high level. I felt like, I'm the baby speaker and there are these incredibly dynamic speakers. The irony being is getting up there and doing that talk and then having, the trajectory of what came after the fact. And so I think as an introvert, I always come from the place of what am I doing in this moment? I'm educating. And then I subjugate my own fears about, not about performance, but more about like, oh my God, I'm an introvert standing in front of 500 people in stadium seating, which was terrifying.
Yeah. And then millions to watch you online afterwards.
Correct. So I think it always comes from like when I'm doubting myself, it's like, what was I put on this earth to do and execute?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome, that's something that is there any human that doesn't, like maybe some people don't admit it, but like it's a human condition, right?
Yes. Unless maybe you're a narcissist or a sociopath.
That's true.
Maybe then you don't have that problem. But I think that I had a really good professor years ago at Hopkins that said to me, the fact that you are conscientious and you're thinking about like, what could I be doing to get better at X, Y, or Z tells me that you will always be in the right place, doing the right thing. I think to me, I don't per se look at imposter syndrome as a negative thing. I look at it as I'm always looking to improve upon exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm never going to settle. And so when I think about, because we all have those moments, I think it's a normal part of the human condition.
Yeah.
The trick is ensuring that you don't get into a place where you undermine yourself, because sometimes people, they get so worried, fixated, concerned about everyone else. Well, the truth is no one's thinking about you. That's one of those big girl realizations, like really no one is worried about what you're doing. Just focus on you and what you need to be doing and execute.
Amen to that. It's so difficult in this sort of social media world that you're living in, right? It's this constant comparison. Everybody is FOMO inducing content. Okay, that's God is just governing this conversation. So what is any tips for people, no matter what space they're in, to just stay in their lane, not in a pejorative of stay in your lane where you're reducing yourself, but how do you stay as a channel and not looking and comparing yourself to other people?
That's such a great question, Will. Number one, stay focused on your purpose. It is so easy. It is so easy to be looking at what everyone else is doing. Oh my God, they're doing this and they're doing that. Why am I not? What is the next thing that's going to move you forward? Not necessarily in your business, but what is the next 2 or 3 things you need to be focused on? Because if you're focused on those next 2 or 3 things, you are not going to be focused on everyone else. And I find, again, it's human nature, right? I have those moments where I literally were like, nope, that's an energy leak. I look at it as energy. It is not the right energy for me. That is scarcity mindset. And so I'm like, how can I snap myself out? And so I just remind myself, what am I doing differently?
Yeah.
What are the things I'm proud of? What are the things I'm working towards? And so I think it's that mindset piece that is so important, I think, for all of us. Like, this is where I go back to, like, having a coach or, constantly working on personal development, how critically important that is for all of us. Because we could go around just feeling badly about ourselves all day long, but that's not productive. That's not serving your purpose. And so I think in many ways, that's usually what I do, and that's what I would counsel anyone on that's listening, irrespective of what your background is.
Yeah.
It's just so easy. No one's looking at you. You do you. Like, as my cousin would say to me, you do you, focus on what you need to be doing, and everything else falls into place.
Yeah, for sure. So it was the second TED Talk that went viral?
Yes.
What was the first? Were both intermittent fasting?
No, first one was on perimenopause. And let me be clear, in 2018, there were like 4 other podcasts about menopause. No one was talking about it. And I remember being, so embarrassed to be taught, like, here I'm a clinician. I'm a nurse practitioner. How could I be embarrassed to talk about a normal thing that happens in our lives as women if we live long enough? And I remember just being embarrassed, but then it felt cathartic. I was like, oh, I'm so glad I'm talking about this, because that experience so many other people like, oh, that's validating. I'm experiencing the same thing. Then I can talk about it with my providers. I feel comfortable talking to my loved ones about it. But no, it was the very sexy topic of perimenopause. And I think the title was surviving to thriving. So that the goal being, you can get through this. And the irony is the talk that I gave in Toronto in December of 2018 was so different. It was the antithesis of the talk I gave in Greenville, South Carolina. The group there was fantastic and wonderful. It was all women. It was very kumbaya womanhood. Then going to Greenville was like I was graduate. It was going from like preschool to graduate school. I mean, that was the shift that happened when I showed up at that second talk and
Wow.
had tremendous imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Okay. So in Toronto in 2017, 2018, were you disappointed by the after? Because every TED Talk speaker wants it to go viral. Right? I mean, that's one of the goals, right? Did it go like mini viral? Not as viral, but still viral?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think I had a healthy amount of views, but I wouldn't describe it as viral. And the irony is, people to this day will pull me aside at parties. They're like, hey, what'd you do to make that talk go viral? I was like, dude, you don't understand. Like, it had almost 100,000 views in one day. That had nothing to do with that. That was right topic, right time, at that time that just,
Yes.
it like caught the wind, and it was wild.
And
like
it was 2019.
That was 2019. And I remember
you did. It was the perfect storm.
That was the
variables.
most Googled nutritional strategy that year. And I remember even telling my kids, oh, I'm going to do this talk. We're going to have the best summer. I'm going to unplug. And it was like my website crashed. I mean, it was unbelievable. Like all of a sudden there was all this traction and attention. And I was like, we weren't ready for it. We didn't expect that to happen. But that's, probably part of the divine synergy when you don't expect things to happen and they happen. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm so humbled and so appreciative, but holy cow, it's like riding a tsunami.
Yeah, it is. And I'm thinking of that time, like right prior to the pandemic, the world was very different.
It was very different. And I think that was the sign for me, Will, that I was meant to take another leap. And so that's when I joined a big mastermind, and that like opened up a whole other world to me of, people with just bigger businesses and bigger environment. I mean, it made me think much more broadly. It forced me to level up in every capacity. And then you're right. Then the pandemic happened and the world came to a screeching halt.
Yeah, but then what I remember about that time is that fasting, because everyone was at home focusing on their health, a lot of people were, at least, they also were making like sourdough bread. Some people were also focusing on health and sourdough bread. And that probably it gave it more legs in a way, the pandemic.
It did.
People were on YouTube more.
Well, and I think, I don't know if you were doing telehealth then, but everything I did was virtual.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of ahead of the curve that my business, it wasn't like we had to suddenly pivot. It was, okay, we're just riding this wave. And the really cool thing was it allowed me to really focus on the podcast.
Yeah.
And that's when we started building a lot of momentum with the podcast.
Yeah, no, we've been telehealth since 2009.
Wow.
So it's just like, I didn't do it because of a pandemic. It was like just because I live in a place that a lot of other people don't live, and we need to figure out logistics. But yeah, same on that front. People just got it, I guess, during the pandemic. Oh, this telehealth thing was a thing. You didn't have to like drive in traffic and then sit in the waiting room for an hour to be seen for 5 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes things convenient. You can do it from wearing your pajamas sitting in your bedroom.
I'm in people's. They're in pajamas. I'm in their living room. It's cool. Their dog's walking by. The cat's by the screen. The dog's barking at us. It's great. Okay, so one other question, TED Talk question that came up for me is when you're on stage giving that talk, are you 100% scripted and you've worked out the actual words perfectly, or is it still slightly off script and you're teaching?
I would say that your TEDx coach, so the Greenville, South Carolina talk, we were assigned a coach who was wonderful, and you come up with a script. Mm-hmm. The challenge is I'm not a memorizer. Yeah. That is not the way my brain works.
Neither, yeah.
And so that was the challenge for me. It was like I got to a point where I was running it through in the shower. I was talking in the car. I mean, my poor husband was like, how many times have I listened to this talk? And you would think 12 minutes doesn't sound like a lot of time. when you're trying to condense a lot of information, 12 minutes is challenging.
Right. And saying the script.
And then saying the script. So actually, in my mind, they had a big clock and they were very clear. If you go over your time, you are going to make everyone else have to wait. And you're going to make all these audience members late, and they're not going to get to lunch on time, because I was the third person to speak in the morning. They wanted me to have enough energy, which was very thoughtful. And I saw 11 minutes and 30 seconds, and I'm thinking, I've got 3 more minutes to talk. So I had to be able to fast forward in my head, cut out a whole chunk of information about autophagy, and finish. I know, I cut autophagy, and of course...
You would have had 18 million.
I know.
If you didn't cut that.
Well, someone said, well, wasn't she supposed to talk about autophagy? And I'm like, well, I was trying to be thoughtful to my other speakers.
On the fly.
On the fly. I don't know how I did that. And I think about it now, like, could I memorize 12 minutes of dialogue? God bless the actors and actresses. Yeah. I'm like, that is a skill I do not possess. Like, that is so stressful. But I'm appreciative and grateful that I was able to execute under the circumstances, and be able to bring it in on time. But yeah, that was quite an experience. But yeah, you draft it out because they want you to get up. They want you to be successful. They kind of have a formula in which they want you to present information.
Got it.
What if I told you? Like, that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to say, but that's kind of what they want you to lead in with. But yeah, you do have some. It's like guardrails around what you're doing.
Talk formula.
Yes.
Makes sense.
And I had a great coach. She was fantastic. And I had a great coach with my first, but it was a longer talk. Like, it was like a runaway talk. It was so long. I'm like, I look at it now, I'm like, oh my God. That was like the runaway talk that just kept going and going and going. But yeah.
Do they still do TED Talks now?
They do. In fact, lots of people always want to reach out and ask.
Yeah. Would you ever go back?
No. Because think about how much money TEDx made off. Let me preface this. I am so grateful and appreciative for having had that opportunity twice. But TEDx is making millions of dollars off of, that every time someone watches that talk. Would I go back? I don't think so. Am I very appreciative and grateful for the opportunity, without question.
Yeah.
And I believe in it. I think it's a really great way for people to demonstrate that they can get on stage and literally execute a talk and do it persuasively. Do I look at mine now and I cringe because I'm like, oh, I was so nervous. I was moving back and forth. They're all the things that you learn not to do, but I'm like, give me a break. I'd only been out of the hospital for like 3 weeks when I got up on stage, and I still had a ruptured appendix.
And people don't know the background. They're just seeing the video, the 12 minutes.
No.
Do you read the comments?
I used to. I don't anymore.
How bad were they?
They generally, what are the things that people make comments about with middle-aged women? She's old. She's not a doctor. And I'm like, that is true. I'm not a doctor, and I am not 20 years old. However, I think I look pretty darn good for 53.
That, you look great.
For 53. Yes.
Not for 53. You just look great.
Yeah, thank you. But in the beginning I did, and then sometimes it's just nonsense and gibberish. Sometimes it's actually like, gosh, I watched this and I lost 20 pounds, and that is wonderful. But I learned very early on to avoid reading comments. Number one, it's distracting you from your purpose. 9 times out of 10, they're probably not all that bad. Thankfully, energetically, I tend not to attract a lot of trolls. Having said that, the ones that vomited all over stuff, I'm like, dude, you have no idea. There's no way. The troll that's trolling me right now is probably living in their mother's basement and is like 50 years old and has all sorts of issues. And I'm like, I want to feel compassionate towards that person. But I'm like, perspective, dude, you would never get up there and do that. You wouldn't be capable or interested in doing that. Like, why would you take the time to be so negative? But generally speaking, I avoid, because it's not productive, and it ends up getting in my head, and then you have that, it's like, all right, let's focus on what's most important, and it's not paying attention to the one troll who decided to vomit all over your talk today.
Yeah, and there is that sort of keyboard warrior bravado, right?
Yes.
It's things these people would never say it to your face.
Correct.
They would smile and be nice.
Correct.
Placate you.
Correct. and I mean, what are we speaking to? It's people living, they're comfortable and they feel like they're safe, so they're not going to push themselves, and that's just not the way I live my life.
And also too, I self-compassion, like, again, not looking at it, having healthy boundaries with it's such a good tip. Another thing to think about is, like, 1 in 5, I think, Americans, this, like, one of the latest statistics, have a diagnosable mental disorder. That's like millions upon millions of people.
Yes.
That is, and the algorithms kind of
It's
prey
skewed
on
to
those
negativity.
people.
It absolutely is. It
Because they're
absolutely
like
is.
served content, they get that sort of dopamine hit. It's
And
that
they
sort
look
of,
for more of it.
yeah.
Absolutely. And
So I think of like, again, that's another level of compassion. Like, okay, yeah, these people are hurting, most of them.
correct. And I think because I, had a kind of bird's eye view to one of the hospitals I worked at was across from Shepherd Pratt, which is, arguably one of the big mental health centers in the United States. We did a lot of intake for them. And I would come home and I would say, 2 nights ago, I was saying I never want to have an aortic aneurysm, but I think even higher up on there is I would not want to have XYZ because you see people suffering so significantly. And in many instances, there's still so much stigma about mental health, and yet it is a big problem. And
Yeah.
I think that we just have to feel compassion and empathy and help people get the resources that they need.
And it is like this weird echo chamber that sort of rewards rage on social media. It is a weird world we live in if you think about sort of the mental health impact that social media is having and the isolation, but the sort of false community that they have, that they feel that they have on social media.
Absolutely.
Okay, intermittent fasting. Has your view or have your views changed on intermittent fasting since you did that TED Talk in 2018?
Absolutely.
2019?
Absolutely.
How so?
I still believe in it as a strategy, and I speak very openly about this. So I'm not saying anything that's going to be earth shattering. People aren't going to be like Cynthia said. Last year, I had to stop doing as much fasting, and I've really gotten conscientious about weight training and building muscle. And the thing that really brought that home for me was my father getting sick, having a series of falls, ended up with 2 significant head bleeds, ended up dying. But what really contributed to his frailties and falls was a loss of muscle and significant sarcopenia, and so, which is muscle loss with aging. And I was like, you know what? I've got the same kind of body habitus as my father's side of the family. I tend to be leaner, but if I'm not working against this, I'm going to easily continue to lose muscle. And so in order to gain muscle, I have to eat 3 meals a day, and that means I have to be really conscientious. Does that mean that when I'm traveling, I may not be fasting? I'm fasted right now. Like I'm on about 15 hours, but I'm traveling. I'm in the process of traveling. But I'm very conscientious. I would say at least 5 days out of the week, I'm getting 3 meals in. I have 12 hours of digestive rest, which I think should be the bare minimum for every single human being that's you've hit your peak growth spurt and you're an adult. Everyone should be embracing. And so that is what I focus on more now, is saying I still believe in the strategy. I think it's very powerful. I think we look at how metabolically unhealthy our population is. People would benefit from eating less frequently. But for me personally, and very transparently, I think it's important to say that right now I'm really focused on building muscle, and that means more food.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's kind of my take on it too. Is it's bioindividuality. But when I wrote that book, Intuitive Fasting, that's what the point of what I was trying to get at is like, okay, who are you? What's the context? If you're metabolically unhealthy, if you're have type 2 diabetes, it's going to be a different approach than someone that's lean, that's perimenopausal, or high stress. I mean, there's a lot of variables to consider. So making broad sweeping statements isn't very helpful to saying it's perfect for everybody and great, everyone should do an OMAD, to fasting is horrible and it's going to kill you.
You want to see the trolls come out, you say don't do OMAD. I have had more nasty rhetoric around OMAD. That is triggering.
Wow.
Because
from the fasting world.
Yes. If I say do not do OMAD habitually, I'm not saying you come back from vacation, you have a night apart. Like, you need to get yourself back on track. I think it's a great strategy.
For people that don't know, what's OMAD?
1 meal a day.
So there's an OMAD tribe out there.
There is very much, and they are very
the chief
rigid.
Of this tribe? Who's the leader?
I'm afraid to say the person's name out loud. I'll tell you after the fact, because I don't know. I don't want the
you don't want to double down on the OMAD trolls, baby.
Yeah, they'll come after me like wildfire. Truly, we had to kick them out of
shocked.
I have a free group on Facebook. Many of these individuals,
OMAD zealots,
we had to kick out.
Okay, this is shocking me. Okay, so I wrote about OMAD and intuitive fasting. It's a tool that can be used for some people at some times, but I didn't realize there was that still in 2025 there are hardliners for OMAD for everybody.
They're going to do it forever, and they don't care that they've lost muscle. They just know they've lost weight, and therefore that is the one that is the one determinant that they're going to
weight loss
utilize.
is the
And I'm
criteria,
like, have you checked your body composition? Because I'm quite confident you don't have a lot of muscle mass on your body.
Let's do a body scan on that.
Yeah. So yes, I have to be very careful. And let me be very clear. I think OMAD, just like intermittent fasting, is one of many strategies that we can do throughout our lifetime. It doesn't have to be habitual every day. Now, are there gym bros that probably eat a massive amount of food in 4 hours of their day or eat like one massive meal? Mm-hmm. Sure, but I don't know any women that can do that.
Yeah. Day in, day out.
Correct.
Every day. Yeah. Okay, this is wild. So, so you vacillate, and I agree with you, like a 12-12, which the fasting zealots don't even consider fasting.
Nope, they'll say to me, that isn't fasting. And so in my new book, we call it digestive rest. Because I was like, we're just going to call it a new name.
Let's rebrand a 12-12 TRF, time restricted feeding. So that 12-12 is basically what, for people that don't know?
It's 12 hours out of your day in which you have 2-3 meals. It is 12 hours out of the day that you are not eating. It is super simple. And I would find that most people, you get up in the morning and you may be hungry at 7 o'clock. And maybe that's when you have, your first bolus of protein. And I think about protein. It's a bolus of protein. And then you might have
nurse practitioner.
Right, exactly. Bolus, boluses of all sorts of things in the hospital. But I think for a lot of people, it makes more sense. Mm-hmm. Like even I have a child who plays college lacrosse, super athletic. My younger son does MMA stuff. They can get by with 12 hours of digestive rest. They don't do it on purpose, but they're like, oh, I ate my last meal at 7. I didn't have a second dinner. I'm going to eat when I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I find for a lot of my women, they're like, oh, it takes all the pressure off. They felt like how many people were white knuckling fasting to get to 16 hours, 17 hours, 18 hours. Oh, you don't have any autophagy evoked unless you get to 24 hours. Shame on you. So, it's this kind of... It's to me, it's very the comparisonitis.
Yes.
Let me be I'm virtue signaling, which drives me crazy. Let me put myself in a position where I'm going to show myself I'm better than you.
Who could be more ascetic and more self-punishing?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's self-flagellation.
And you get all these type A personalities that do it too. It is a bad recipe.
Well, like this is what they do. They fast for 20. I'm going to say for women. They fast for 20 hours. They get in the cold plunge. They then get in the hot sauna. They then decide they're going to carb restrict, so they have no carbs. They're wondering why they've lost their menstrual cycle. They have, they're losing hair in their head. They have no energy. Their cortisol is so dysregulated. Yeah. You do salivary cortisol, and you're like, you look terrible on paper, let alone like all their blood work, which then supports this. It's too much stress. Like it is a hormetic stressor. Right amount of stress at the right time. That is what we're talking about. And I would actually argue that women tend to do, the type A's in particular, I'm one of them. I've had to learn this the hard way multiple times. We do such a terrible job of self-flagellating. And I'm here to tell you that when we treat our bodies a little more gently, this is oftentimes where the sweet spot happens. All of a sudden, women are losing weight. All of a sudden, they're sleeping better. All of a sudden, they have more energy. All of a sudden, they have their libido return. And it's all because they are treating themselves with kindness as opposed to like looking at what a 30-year-old guy can do and thinking, I need to do exactly that. No, you don't.
Yes.
We're not mini men, as Stacey Sims says so eloquently. I think we need to understand that there's a time and a place.
Yeah. Amen. How can you bring grace and lightness and flexibility and not out masochist some rando on social media?
There's so much of it. I mean, it sometimes makes me chuckle, and for me, the one thing I've learned is, I think because of the field of medicine that I was attracted to, I wanted to prove myself. I'm going to pick the most intense place to work. The NP service was very autonomous in cardiology. And I'm like, divine masculine energy for women is good, right? It gets stuff done. But what do I need to learn more of is embracing the divine feminine. And that means I have to back off on the intensity of things and just have more of a flow state where things fall into place.
Flow. Yeah. Okay. So practically, what does fasting, a flexible, conscious fasting look like for many women out there?
I think it is being attuned. Is you're still getting a cycle, being attuned to where you are in your cycle. Number one.
Yeah. So how would you do a cyclical fast around a menstrual cycle?
Yeah, I would say, from the day of starting of bleeding up until ovulation, that's kind of that follicular phase when estrogen predominates. You tend to have more energy, you tend to have more libido, you can get away with more intense exercise. That's a time you can get away with a bit of fasting. Now, if you're already lean, if you are already very athletic and you are exercising 5 days a week, I am never going to recommend that you are doing fasting 7 days a week. This is where I think we get into trouble. I think a couple days, maybe 2 days. If you are, however, a PCOS patient, you are already not metabolically healthy, you have 30 plus pounds to lose, 20 pounds to lose. I think a bit of targeted intermittent fasting, again, maybe not every day, maybe it's every other day that you're doing some fasting around your menstrual cycle can be very helpful. Now, after ovulation, some of the PCOSers don't have a normal menstrual cycle. After ovulation, as you're getting closer to when your menstrual cycle was going to begin, that's when we need to be kinder to ourselves. That stillness, the yoga, less intense physical activity. Maybe you're doing 12 to 13 hours of digestive rest. How many messages have I gotten from girlfriends or in DMs from women saying, oh my God, I feel terrible. I'm trying to fast. I can't get beyond 13 hours. I'm like, where are you in your cycle? Oh, my cycle's supposed to start this week. Back off on the fasting. And so I think if women really were attuned to how they felt and as opposed to forcing an outcome, I think they would do a whole lot better. So that's the women still getting a cycle. Let's think about menopausal women.
Yeah, let's go there.
So menopausal women, we have the benefit of no menstrual cycles, right? More stable hormones. Our gut microbiome starts to resemble, where it was before we went into puberty, more like a guy's. Again, I go back to that piece about women forcing themselves. So if your sleep is terrible, if you can't manage your stress, and we know we become less stress resilient navigating perimenopause and menopause, if your nutrition is terrible, and most of us are eating ultra-processed foods and not eating real nutrient-dense whole foods, and we're not eating enough protein, we're eating too much carbohydrates, which is a whole separate conversation. And if we're not lifting weights or we're not being conscientious about exercise, adding in more hormetic stress is not per se the right thing to do. I will oftentimes say to women, if you cannot sleep through the night, do not start fasting because your body is already stressed. We know if we look at the research, what is happening, not just in our brains, but also metabolically, neuroendocrine wise, what is going on when we don't sleep. Just with one night, what happens? But over time, if you are not sleeping well, do not add more gasoline to the fire. Now, however, if you are someone that is sleeping through the night, you're probably on HRT too. You are managing your stress as best as you can. You eat predominantly whole foods. You do exercise. Then I think a bit of fasting is not a bad idea. I think for a lot of women, they come to fasting for a desire to lose weight. I respect that. I get it. That's where I was in perimenopause, out of an abundance of frustration. If you're a very lean menopausal woman, I don't want you fasting every day. 12 to 13 hours of digestive rest is sufficient for most people.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the nuance comes in. I think there's been very much this all or nothing mentality. And I've come to find some days I feel like fasting and I will fast. Some days I don't feel like fasting and I'll eat at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I would just invite women to think about, where are you in your life trajectory? Are you under 35? We have to be thinking first and foremost about preserving fertility, even if you choose not to have kids.
Just 30, from hormonal health standpoint.
Correct. 35 to 50, perimenopause journey. Things get a little more interesting. I think perimenopause can be when a lot of women feel like they no longer understand their bodies. They feel like they don't understand what's happening to their bodies. And so again, it goes with that context of, are you sleeping? Are you managing your stress? I can tell you, when I was working even part-time for that cardiology group and my kids were young and my husband was traveling internationally, the last thing I should have been doing was a ton of fasting and low carb and intense exercise. I didn't know better, but I always say, don't do what I did. Learn from my mistakes so that you can navigate perimenopause in a much more, happier, more fulfilled few years that you're in it. But I think for a lot of women, they need to hear, I'm giving you permission to course correct. I'm giving you permission to change your mind. I think that is really important.
And trust their body.
Correct. And I think we've gotten so far away from allowing women to feel like they can trust their bodies and their intuition and themselves.
Amen to that. Okay, so where, if any, since your opinion has shifted and evolved, and that's a part of being a human, it's okay to, when Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. It's
Correct.
like, if you're staying the same on most things, it's like we're supposed to learn, evolve and change and shift, and people's seasons can shift. So maybe that truth is still the truth, but it worked for you in this season of your life as a therapy or whatever you're talking about, right? But it doesn't mean you always have to do it the same way forever and ever. Amen. It doesn't make you a failure. But the more, let's say, advanced, the longer fasts, the tighter eating windows, the OMADs or the almost OMADs, who would you recommend those for?
I think they're great for people who are not metabolically healthy to get kind of on track. I feel like for many patients, they need to go a couple days without food. Number one, to show themselves that they're not going to die, because that is always the concern. And I'm like, I get it. I understand it. Hunger is something a lot of people feel emotionally uncomfortable with, because they're like, wait a minute, my stomach's growling, it means I need to eat. No, let's have some stillness. I think when someone is not metabolically healthy, that's when I would invite the opportunity to consider a longer fast. Obviously, in some instances, it needs to be medically supervised, because some people are having a lot of comorbid conditions that are going along with that. But I think those are the people I think about that I'm most interested in having that conversation. On the flip side, if you are already very lean and thin, I don't want you doing super long fasts. I just think intuitively it goes against. We want to preserve muscle. We don't want to catabolize muscle. As someone who lost 15 pounds of muscle, I will probably spend the rest of my life trying to put it back on, I can tell you it is very hard north of 40 to put muscle on, especially as a female. And so I think that we really have to be thinking about what is the goal. And if someone is not metabolically healthy, which is a 92 to 93% of our population right now, I think those are the people that I think in many ways they'll get on top of their cravings. They'll get on top of like, what does true intrinsic hunger feel like? Because in many instances, they have not been fueling their bodies for hunger. They've been doing it to fuel other feelings, or they've just been like, okay, it's 9 o'clock, I should eat. Okay, it's 1 o'clock, I should eat. Okay, it's 7 o'clock, I should eat. And I encourage people, like, sometimes you need that reset to get attuned to your body again.
Yeah. So I think it was like the UNC report, right, a couple of years ago that said like 90 to 93% of America is not metabolically healthy. So just to be clear for everybody, 92 out of 100 Americans are going to benefit from more moderate to longer fast, at least cyclically, at least throughout the week or month, right? Yes. So just be clear on that. But we're talking about that 7-8% of the population, a lot of the health aficionados, they're lean, they're aging. We don't want to be super hormetic when we don't need to be.
So I think carbohydrates are one of these macronutrients that are so misunderstood.
Oh, yeah.
And I think on a lot of levels, I was low carb for a long time, not necessarily ketogenic. And I would cycle my carbs, and I would talk about how to cycle your carbs, where you were in your cycle. And then I just kind of thought to myself, intuitively, my body craves protein and carbohydrates. I do better with leaner meats, leaner fish, leaner poultry. That's what works for me. And I would find when I would eat higher fat meat, I would feel nauseous. I didn't feel good. It turns out that with some blood work that we did, I'm a hyperabsorber. So we do this cholesterol balance test with Boston Heart, and my functional med doc looks at me and he goes, this is how intuitive you are. He's like, you've been avoiding all these fats for a reason. So I've been experimenting along with less fasting with doing more carbohydrate intake. And so probably 100, 125 a day when I had been, under 50 for a long time.
Which is still moderate carb.
Correct.
I mean, it's not like high carb.
Correct. And even experimenting with some grains, which I wasn't doing for a long time.
Shock, horror.
I know. And it's like ancient
Contraband.
grains. I know. But what I've found is that it's improved my workouts. I have more energy.
Be clear on this. I want to get your take on this.
Yeah.
I do so much better on like a white rice versus all the dang nut flours out there. Like all the paleo treats, grain-free treats, they wreck me, all the nuts. But I do fine with white rice. So
I think it's.
What do you think of that?
I think it's bioindividuality. I mean, for me, I can have some grains, but I keep my portions small because I do notice that for me personally, if I'm a third of a cup, a half a cup, that's probably where my happy place is. With that being said, I just think it goes back to bioindividuality. How physically active are you? How much muscle mass do you have? I think for a lot of individuals, they have to do some experimentation. I personally eat a lot of vegetables and I like fruit. And so those are things I do I don't measure my fruit. I went this years of like, oh, I'm paleo, so I have to be really conscientious about how much carbohydrates I'm consuming. I do way better with my workouts. My trainer could attest to this. I do much better with sleep with a little bit more carbohydrate. And so I encourage people, if you've gotten yourself whittled down to, fructose is the devil. No, it is not. If you are metabolically healthy, you can absolutely have some fruit.
Amen.
You can absolutely have, if you tolerate grains. I mean, I don't do gluten and I don't do dairy because I don't do well with them. And that's what doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people, giving yourself permission to experiment, number one. And number two, if you decide to course correct, give yourself grace to do so.
One of these ways of eating, whether it be a paleo diet or carnivore diet or any ways of eating, they are oftentimes best. Yes, they're a nutritional intervention. They're a therapeutic standpoint to heal or facilitate some change, positive change. But oftentimes they're best used as a temporary solution. And then the reintroduction is just as important, right? To figure out what your body loves and what it doesn't love, bioindividuality. And you may be fine on the things you weren't having for a while. Or maybe what didn't work for you then, you've worked on your gut health, for example, and you can reintroduce it because you've built resilience.
Yeah. Well, and I think when I've had guests on the podcast that have talked about oxalate as an example, and I'm like, after coming out of the hospital, having 6 weeks of antibiotics and antifungals, my gut was wrecked. I couldn't handle an oxalate if my life depended on it for a long time.
Yeah.
But as I've healed my gut, suddenly I can have oxalates, and so oxalate-laden foods, and I don't have an issue. So I think for a lot of people, they demonize plant defenses, and it's like either they need to be prepared properly, or it might be a sign that your gut microbiome is not optimized. And that's where a lot of people, they start to put the, A plus B equals C, and they're like, oh, I need to work on my gut, and then I can actually tolerate X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, right. So is the oxalate sensitivity a pointer of something else? And that's like the gasoline on the fire? It's not the sweet potato. It's the...
it's like raspberries, and I would have like crackers that had almond flour in them, and that would just send my gut into a death spiral.
Really?
I feel like, I almost felt like I was getting poked with knives. I was like, what is going on?
So for people that don't know, what are oxalates and why are people freaked out?
Yeah, oxalates are one of several types of plant-based defenses. You can find them in things like spinach. I mean, things that we're told we should consume: spinach, celery, raspberries, almond flour. A lot of these paleo-esque foods that are healthy, that people have been told, oh, you can't eat those. Those are bad. I'm like, no.
So they could have I would say the explosion, the sort of zeitgeist of the carnivore movement, I think really highlights this.
Yes. And I, for full transparency, for 9 months after I was hospitalized, the only thing I could tolerate was a carnivore diet. I didn't want to just eat meat, but that was the only thing that didn't inflame my gut.
You met your body where it was at that point.
Correct. And then I missed vegetables. Like, I used to dream about Brussels sprouts. It was the craziest thing. So I tell people, like, when people say, oh, you don't need fiber, or, you can do a carnivore diet in perpetuity, I'm like, okay, it's always in the context of bioindividuality. But if you look at the research would certainly suggest that there are benefits from eating an omnivorous diet as opposed to just a meat-based diet. And I think you can use certain diets in a targeted fashion like I did, where, this is the period of time that I needed to do that to help heal my gut, although that's going to be for the rest of my life. It's not like, I go 9 months and it's healed. It's going to be the rest of my life that I'm working on it. But I think for a lot of people, they again get rigid, or they get paranoid, like, oh, I can't have a lentil, or I can't have a sweet potato, or I can't have this because I watched an influencer talk about how this has wrecked their health or caused their health harm. And I'm like, okay, it goes back to, like, let's look at you as an individual, what has gone on with your life. Do you have autoimmune conditions? Do you have chronic stress? Are you not sleeping? Like, what are the things that could be exacerbating or contributing to why? Or did you just spend 6 weeks on antibiotics and your gut is wrecked? There can be a lot of contributing factors. And I think that's where I always say, like, the power of the N of one is so important for people to understand. Yeah,
exactly. And back to that social media comparison, it's tough because, like, you don't know somebody else's labs and context and what their life looks like. So again, it's amazing. It's empowering people, and I love the democratization of information, and people can sort of have all this content at their fingertips to empower themselves and educate themselves. But it's a double-edged sword.
It absolutely
Then you think
is.
everything's applicable to you, and it sort of creates these echo chambers and unintended orthorexia, maybe even.
That's huge. And I can tell you, I had a wonderful guest who talked about oxalates, and I got so much hate because people were then more confused after listening to the podcast. And I said, this is in context of all these other things that we've talked about. And just because one person is sensitive does not per se mean that everyone is sensitive, but it's building awareness, because that might be, there may be 5 people listening that might be the one piece of the puzzle they have not figured out, and it might be life-changing.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, there's a certain onus of the consumer of the information to have discernment. It's like we want to be spoon-fed everything. It's like, okay, it's okay to learn discernment, and just because you're hearing it doesn't mean it's applicable to you. But I think we've lost that. It's almost like we want to be told what to do, and we think everything applies to us, and we don't know how to pick and choose what is relevant to us.
Well, and that critical thinking piece is
Critical thinking.
very important. I jokingly say, and I was telling a colleague this once, that, you know, when I was still working in a traditional medical model, I would sometimes, when I was rounding, I would think, oh my God, who's going to take care of us when we get older? And I would say that to my physician colleagues, like, who is going to take care of us? Because there is a lack of critical thinking going on with some of the people I'm interacting with, and that is concerning.
Yeah.
And so that is not specific to medicine. That could be in any field of any way.
Yeah.
But my kids know that, you know, lack of critical thinking, I will question who their parents are.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this is a life skill that everyone needs to embrace, because it is important for the survival of our species.
Right. But I'm wondering how much of what we are viewing as maybe a lack of critical thinking, it's like we have a whole generations of people that are just letting technology think for themselves.
That's a great point. This kind of passive exposure to information. Well, I'll use the example, my cousin again, loves TikTok. And she was saying, oh, I watched on TikTok. And I was like, wait a minute. It's like anywhere. You can get great information. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about social media. If we look at it from that lens, you have accessibility to information. It isn't necessarily all correct or right. And so that's the concern, is that if we're just passively learning or passively getting information, not only may it be incorrect, but it could also be, you know, it could be harmful potentially. And so that's why I think it's important for everyone listening to be conscientious about, you know, the information we're consuming, whether it be on social media or something we're reading, or, you know, something we see in the lay press or
in
anywhere
your classrooms.
else. Or in your classrooms, exactly. And it's interesting. So my youngest son goes to a school that is pretty progressive, and he's kind of a conservative kid. And the first day of school, he's now a rising senior, so first day of freshman year, his teacher, and Liam can be a little defiant and is not, he doesn't go with the flow. That's just not his personality. He's very much his own person. And the teacher was saying, I want everyone to talk about how they identify, because this is important. We want to be respectful of one another. And Liam, being Liam, said, I'm a bear. I identify as a bear. And the teacher was like, what? And he's like, I am a bear. And his teacher was like, Liam, you think you're a bear? And he's like, yes, I think I'm a bear. And you know, we had to have this whole conversation with him and then with the teacher. And I said, he's not being disrespectful. He's just trying to demonstrate that it's important to be a free thinker. It's important to be like, yes, I respect however my classmates view themselves, but I just think this is kind of silly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I just think for all of us, we have to be independent-minded thinkers. It's important.
Free thinkers, because there is a lot of groupthink with
Yes.
a lot of different sects
Yes.
out there, and some sects have a bigger microphone than others.
Yes,
or
and that's
more
a great way to
accepted
think.
as orthodoxy than others. you
Well,
know?
it's interesting, again, this free group. I use it as like a litmus test of like what's going on in the world. And every once in a while, there'll be someone in the group that will try to school me. Maybe they don't realize that it's my group, but they'll try to school me. And I'm like, well, actually, I've spoken to that expert, and that's not actually what they said. So I will kindly kind of say, okay, well, I've actually spoken to that individual, and that's not actually what they say. And they're like, oh, I didn't realize that. And I'm like, that's how this kind of trickle down of information. It's like telephone.
Yeah.
When we were little kids,
Yes.
you would whisper something, and by the time it got to the last person,
yeah.
sounded completely different than what the first person had stated. So
Yeah. Oh, there's so much of that going on. Something we talked about, you and I talked about before we started recording, was dysautonomia. This is something that is a passion of mine, and we see a lot of telehealth patients with it, and it's driven by different things. But yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, to share with people what you've experienced.
Yeah, so I've experienced this as a clinician. So in cardiology, we saw like the most severe cases, which were postural orthostatic hypotension, and many of those patients ended up on medication and getting tilt table studies, and sometimes got referred to big centers because they were beyond the scope of what we could treat, and appropriately so. Like now I see it as like that was the right referral to make. I personally have a very mild form of dysautonomia, and I probably have had this for more than 10 or 15 years. And it was interesting to me that, I was having a conversation with my functional med doc and saying, like, I've always noticed I need more salt in my food. My blood pressure tends to run low, but not so low that I feel like I'm going to pass out. I'm not dizzy, but I have to hydrate more than the average person. Like if I have a day where I'm recording podcasts, my HRV is in the toilet that night. And it's because I have not been able to hydrate because I've been doing so much talking. And so, we did a series of tests, and he looked at me, he said, you realize you have a degree of dysautonomia, right? And I was like, no. He's like, yes. And so for me, the way that it manifests predominantly is it's a hydration piece, it's salting my food, it's the recognition I need an abundance of minerals, and I have to be really conscientious about electrolytes and when I travel and when I'm speaking. And then the stress will further deplete me. So if I'm stressed or if I'm traveling time zones, which I tend to do with some regularity now, I have to even be, so the self-care piece for me is like top of the heap. I will put myself to bed early. I will do all the things. But dysautonomia is on a spectrum. And when most people hear that, they're like, oh, no, you've got POTS. No, that's not what I have. But there are other constellation of things that can go along with that. And I also have a couple autoimmune conditions. And, my N of one is that there's a lot of things that can contribute, but, kind of looking at underlying trauma and, chronic stress that you deal with can absolutely contribute.
Yeah. Thanks for shedding light on that. My friend, I could talk to you all day long, but before we go, the podcast, it's called The Art of Being Well. At the end, we have Your Art of Being Well. What's the worst, most disgusting tasting food that you eat, but it's done for its health benefits, not for its yumminess?
Organ meats.
Oh, yeah. Every day, all day, baby. What is there any, like, what's the worst offender of organ meats? What's the most disgusting?
I have a texture thing, so I don't.
Sensory issues.
No. I have. So my husband thinks I'm crazy, and I have a son who has the same thing, and he's like, "You guys like dissect your meat." Spleen. I'm like literally like I'd have to cut it in teeny tiny pieces and like just swallow it. I can't. There's something about different textures. Heart.
Yeah. Oh, disgusting. No way. Sorry.
And I grew up with a mother that was Italian, so we were eating organ meat as kids, and my mother would try to disguise it with bacon.
Oh.
And my brother and I were smart. We ate the bacon. We left the organ meats, and then my mother would we would sit in front of us for hours, and we're like, we can't do it. It's too metallic.
I'm right there with you. The way that I do it is like the ancestral blends, where it's like blended in.
Yes, I take a capsule.
Yeah. Well, mine's actually ground meat.
Oh.
So have you seen this?
No.
Force of Nature. Yeah, okay. You can get it at Whole Foods. There's other companies that do it too. But Force of Nature has their ancestral blends, where it's like basically I don't know if it's exactly this, but it's about a third of organ meats, 2/3 regular meat. So you can make your meatloaf or burger patty or whatever. And they have a different meats as well, not just beef. That's what you need. But the capsules also are a workaround.
Well, and it's like I've been giving the capsules to my husband, but it has been, I have a texture issue.
Yeah. Is there anything, well, it doesn't sound like if you landed on capsules, but is there like the better of the best taste you can get from it that you like? No.
And so here's an interesting fun fact about me. When I was at Hopkins, they did all the students we were always participating in research because they would pay us and we were all poor. And I found out I'm a hyper taster. So it doesn't surprise anyone to know, okay, well, I never liked strong cheese. I never was a big coffee drinker or tea drinker. Anything that has a strong taste, I've never gravitated towards because I apparently have more taste buds per square millimeter on my tongue than the average person.
Of course, you know that.
All my friends that were the opposite were the ones that could, eat all the stinky foods and with reckless abandon, and I would want to vomit. So, for me, is it any surprise that the organ meats would be problematic?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I have it's one of those quirky things.
I probably have a high ratio of taste buds too. I'm gonna blame that. I'm gonna say that. I haven't had the Hopkins study, but do you take supplements? And if so, what are the two like most maybe more out of the box, lesser known supplements that people should know about?
Oh, out of the box. So out of the box, I was going to say top supplements. I was going to say creatine monohydrate, but obviously that's I think that's very much conventional.
It's super conventional, very well researched. But I would say women taking it specifically is emerging. Yeah. But a lot of people don't know about the fact of its neuroprotective benefits.
Well, and we have 70-80% less stores of creatine kinase in our muscle. We have there's emerging research about supporting methylation and brain protection and jet lag and all these other things. So for me, I think about that predominantly. I would say lesser known, Tudka.
Love it.
It's one of my favorite supplements. I think it's been I think it's been helpful for mitochondrial health, for brain health, for detoxification support. I would say Tudka is one in particular that I think should be on people's radars and probably isn't talked about enough. More so than like oxblood, bile salts, those kinds of things.
Yeah, plus you mentioned that sort of hyperabsorber of fats too, where you have that fat malabsorption. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's total like life changer for me. Like we try to cycle, take a month on, 1 month off to see how I feel, and I always feel better when I take it.
Got it. Great tip. Where's somewhere that you mentioned kind of traveling time zones a lot lately? Where's somewhere that you've been to that should be on other people's bucket list?
Oh, Istanbul, without question. I was just there this summer. It was incredible. Like my entire family, we did the lower part of Eastern Europe and I was like, we're that far east, we should go to Istanbul. Highlighted the trip, loved the food, thought the people were amazing, everything we saw, it was magical. I would say Istanbul, without question.
That's amazing. Where the East meets West.
Yes, and we actually got to go to the Asia side of Istanbul, which didn't feel any different, but we were actually able to say about it. But as well as in Europe on the other side, but just the history and everything about it. But my kids, all of us just loved it.
That's great. Where's somewhere that you haven't been to that's on your bucket list?
Oh, God, so many places. There's an app I have on my phone that allows you to tally, like, where have you been? Where do you want to go? So I have about 30 more countries to go. I would say right now I'm preoccupied with Chile. That's where I would like to go next. My husband has done more international travel than I have, and he keeps telling me, he's like, why don't we go back to Europe? I'm like, no, I want to go to South America. I want to go to Chile or Argentina. So those are probably like on my bucket list for the next trip for he and I.
Love it. Do you eat out ever? And if so, what's your favorite restaurant at the moment?
I don't eat out all that often. I would say there's an amazing steak place near us where they do it's a kind of French-inspired restaurant, and they make amazing steaks and they cook everything to perfection. I tend to be kind of a minimalist when I go out. It's like I want my steak, I want my vegetable. I don't drink alcohol, so I'll watch my husband have a drink. But they do all these kind of amazing compounded butters and different types of sauces that are clean. And so I would say that's probably my favorite place. That's outside of Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah. You guys have a True Food Kitchen there too, don't you? Or no, maybe
not. But that is my go-to when I'm traveling. Yes, they're Fairfax, Reston, Arlington.
Yeah, Arlington.
And I keep begging them to build one in Richmond.
Yes, come on, DFK.
I'm like, please. That's my go-to when I travel. Like my team last night was making fun of me. Did we eat a True Food Kitchen? I was like, Pittsburgh doesn't have one.
No, sadly. I've talked to both Andrew Weil and Jason Karp, and I don't know if they're just placating me, but they promised me it could happen sometime in the future.
Well, that's
I'm
exciting.
praying. I'm hoping. What's your True Food Kitchen order?
I get the grass-fed beef burger with a lettuce wrap, and I do a simple salad, and I usually do the cauliflower.
Nice. What do you get? Any of their fancy drinks?
I love their Tulsi tea.
Me too.
And there's something about the ginger and the honey, and it's perfect. And my husband was like, "Oh, I'm going to buy you this Tulsi tea," and it's like a Tulsi tea bag. And I was like, "But it's not the same."
No, you get.
I don't know if it's that they grate the ginger, and I need the honey. Yeah, that's usually my go-to. But my kids don't love going there because they feel like the portions aren't large enough. They're teen boys, so I will say that.
My son orders too.
Yes, that's exactly. And my husband's like, "This ends up becoming a very expensive meal."
It does, 100%. My son gets basically two. But he does that pretty much anywhere.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, you understand that.
Yeah, you know your human design. Do you know your Enneagram?
I might be an 8.
Okay.
I might be an 8.
Okay.
if memory serves me correctly.
Okay. I love that you knew that, though. Okay. Before we go, well, I have one more question on your art of being well. What's a book that you've read that was paradigm shifting for you that I should add to the Art of Being Well book club
The
list?
Unhealthy Truth by Robin O'Brien changed the trajectory of my life. Truly. And I've had her on the podcast, and I said, I have to tell you that reading your book made me so angry that it got me started. And I did a functional nutrition program, but I have a son with severe life-threatening food allergies still to this day. And her book, I could read a chapter at a time. It made me so angry. And I think it's a book that everyone should read. I mean, it's 10 years old. But I really value Robin's voice in the space, former lobbyist that had a child that ended up developing food allergies. And so that's a book I oftentimes will gift to people and recommend highly.
Wow. Thank you so much. Cynthia,
that was like right on my tongue.
I know. You knew what I was going to add. This has been a blessing of a conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so
Where
much.
do people go to learn about your work, connect with you, and all the things?
Absolutely. So easiest to go to my website, so www.cynthiathurlow.com. You can access my podcast. You've been a guest twice, Everyday Wellness. Get access to all my social media. I'm just starting Substack. We are attempting to grow it. I feel like it's a passion project. I've got a book coming out next year, which is really exciting, all about the microbiome changes that happen in perimenopause and menopause, which impacts everything, by the way. And I would say if you reach out on social media, let me know that you listened to the podcast, and I'll be happy to connect with you.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.